Thank you, Gaia, for arranging this conference. It's been great, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak for you all. I'm going to talk about how collaboration is revolutionizing public sector AI. My name is Jonatan Permert, and I have been working at AI Sweden for the last 2 years. The public sector in Sweden and really all over the world are standing in front of a very large and difficult challenge. We have an aging population. We're going to need to employ about 400,000 people the coming 10 years. These are people that are not going to exist. We're going to have a very large shortage of workers in the public sector. Some fear that we may need to deliver 125% of today's welfare using only 75% of today's resources. At the same time, there is a very great opportunity right now. Generative AI for text has shown a great potential to increase efficiency and quality in text-related tasks. I think no one today really doubts that generative AI will be able to help us all in text-related tasks. But the research also shows that you can increase efficiency by 25% and quality by 40%. And the public sector is uniquely positioned to benefit from this technology because they are working a lot with texts. They base their jobs on texts. They read texts, they have laws to comply with, they produce texts. This is a very big deal, big part of their work. At the same time, the technology is very mature. It is actually quite implementable. It is very much useful, and it's out there waiting for us to just make use of it. But there's a paradox here. We're not seeing a large breakthrough in AI adoption of generative AI in the public sector. And that's probably because the public sector are standing in front of 3 major categories of challenges. There's resource challenges. Infrastructure is hard, it's expensive, and one single organization cannot host large language models by themselves. There's also a very large scarcity of AI experts. I don't think there's enough experts in Europe to employ the whole public sector in Sweden alone with AI experts. There's also specific sector challenges. There's limited AI offerings on the market that are tailored for public sector, and there's a very complex legal landscape when you try and use these products. But there's also large data challenges. We basically have no Swedish training data from the public sector. And I'm not talking about all the data that we can use in pre-training of large language models. I'm talking about annotated training data for fine-tuning of large language models. And this is a big problem because we want models to be more capable within our sector, understanding our context much more than they do today. And there is also no data readiness almost anywhere in the sector. And this is not surprising because it's hard for anyone. And this is such a new concept. So this is really insurmountable challenges for any individual organization. We're going to need a new approach if we're going to tackle these challenges. So what do we propose? We propose that a collaboration hypothesis. Public sector organizations must learn how to share critical resources and generate data collectively. This sounds maybe banal or simple, but it's actually quite challenging. So we have launched an initiative starting from AI Sweden. We launched it in 2023 called a shared digital assistant for the public sector. We started off with about 6 public organizations, and it has grown rapidly, and we now have over 55 public organizations, and we're receiving also support from Vinnova. So this is about 20% of all municipalities kommuner in Sweden, which is a large chunk of organizations cooperating together. We're working with hardware partners. We started off with Intel, and now our hardware partner is Iron. And the goal is to collaborate for data sovereign Swedish-based AI solutions. So how do we go about to achieve this? We're using a 5-pillar approach. And we need to do it in this scale to be able to tackle all the prerequisites for managing such an initiative. We have to have a holistic approach. We need to not only look at systems, we have to look at infrastructure. We also have to look at the data generation side. We have to do a lot of AI transformation support. And we have to work on legal frameworks for this to work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these pillars. AI transformation is probably the single most overlooked factor for successful AI adoption. It is the thing that we tend to forget. It is the thing that we tend to think will happen by itself. But in reality, you need to spend about 60% of your resources in any implementation project to have a successful AI adoption. That means that if you spend 40%, often meaning 10% on AI technologies, about 30% on data, you have to spend about 60% on transformative actions. So in this initiative, we're therefore working very actively with employee training. We're building an extensive use case library for public sector tasks, and we're working with responsible AI guidelines, because in the public sector especially, there's a lot of ethical risks and a lot of compliance that's needed. But we also need to assist in data readiness. This is a complex and challenging area, and organizations can do it, but they need to know how. Here's an example where we're out talking. This is Lucas, who is actually moderating on the other stage. So a big shout out to Lucas, who's been fantastic in this initiative. Another pillar that we're exploring is shared AI solutions. So we've actually built a prototype called Svea. I'll actually show Svea quickly. This is what Svea looks like right now. Sorry for the small text. And this is a chat-based web interface. Should come as no surprise to anyone. But it is a completely standalone solution with no external services. It is model agnostic, so we can use any kind of large language model in this software. And right now we're using Llama 3.3 70 billion instruct. We have built an advanced RAG solution for being able to implement, or rather retrieve organizational knowledge in augmented generation. And we have full data sovereignty within Sweden. We're also working with shared infrastructure. And this is really exciting because we have seen that it is going to be too hard for individual organizations to host their own infrastructure. And actually, it is wildly ineffective. It's very not cost effective. Plus, you cannot really control for sustainability when you do it by yourself. So we've been working with Intel, using their Gaudi 2 servers in the first part of the project. And right now, we're partnered with Iron. And Iron is a really exciting company. They are a self-operated HPC data center in Sweden, actually almost right here in Lidköping, for you Gothenburgers who know where that is. And they offer full data sovereignty in their center, and they have a bare metal approach to hardware. That means that we can use specific hardware. We're not running this in a cloud that distributes compute. And this is very important from a privacy perspective. If we're going to be able to run multiple organizations' data through the system, we need to know exactly what's happening, and we need to be able to ensure privacy. This system is also sustainable by default, since Iron is using mostly sustainable energy, renewable energies. Thank you, Jonatan. And basing it in Sweden, we are doing it as climate responsible as we can at the moment. This is probably one of the most innovative and exciting pillar that we're exploring, and actually one of my personal favorites. The collective data generation and centralized fine-tuning of shared AI models. This is something that we had no idea if it was actually going to work when we started doing this. The idea is that if we're going to amass great amounts of data, we need to work together. How can we coordinate 50 organizations to create data together? So we tried to do this by having the domain experts themselves express organizational needs. So we've talked a lot to these public organizations, to their experts, to their employees, talking about what do they want to see from models, how do we want them to work in their context. Then we have had AI experts, big shout out to Adam, create annotation tasks. These tasks are such that they are easy to do, easy for any employee to do, but they deliver a lot of value in terms of data. And then the employees annotate the data. And we have a cycle of annotate, train, deploy, annotate, train, deploy. This is basically the framework we're doing. We're having domain experts identify the business value. We have AI experts defining the annotation goals and tasks. And then we have the organizations letting teams of annotators annotate to create training data. So right now we have actually about 30 organizations and about 300 plus people creating annotations. I'm going to talk about those results a little bit later. Here's an example of what our annotation interface looks like. Sorry for the small text once again. But you can see that they're given a text, and they are given questions, and they rate these questions. And this creates preference data of very high quality. Another thing that's really important is a legal framework. We need to have a system in the public sector that can process sensitive information from multiple organizations. This is important because many of the use cases in the public sector are such that they use sensitive information. And if public organizations are going to be able to generate the most value from AI, they also need to be able to use it with sensitive information. This is not sharing of, say, sensitive information. This is only processing. This is only in the inference stage of data generation, of LLM generation. So we need some system requirements here. They have to be privacy preserving. They have to be compliant multi-organization system architectures. And we have to have technical and organizational safeguards that comply with GDPR and OSL. And we have to have extensive documentation. We believe that if we actually do this, and we have had lawyers working on this for quite some time now, we're going to be able to build such a system, which is very exciting. So, does it work? We actually didn't quite know when we started. We had a hypothesis, and we threw ourselves into the wild, and we gave it as good a shot as we could. But we knew that this was very hard in coordination, very hard in anchoring this idea with the organizations, and we had to work a lot with communication. So what are the results? Svea has about 6,000 accounts today, and is being used actively by about 1,000 users. They use Svea every week for hours on end. And the astonishing thing is that 85% of these active users report time savings, quality improvements, and actually increase in job satisfaction. This is quite astonishing because it is a software built for not that much money, completely based on all open software and open AI models. It is a prototype, and it really shows that there's great potential in building something like this. We have also done a very big knowledge increase. We've trained about 1,200 employees. We've done some extensive use case documentation, and we're creating a national RAG database that holds laws and other kinds of information that are really useful for public organizations. And now, maybe the most exciting part of all, the data. About 300 annotators, more than 300 annotators, have spent 1,000 annotation hours since the 3rd of March. And we have received 70,000 annotations. So this has worked beyond our expectations, and we're very proud of this. And we're also very proud of the hard work that's been put in by the workers in these municipalities. They are engaged, they are curious, and they are really willing to put in the work that is needed to make this initiative work. So we're ever so grateful for all their hard work. And the most fantastic thing is that the data actually shows high quality. So we've been analyzing the data quality, and we see very high annotator agreement and other kinds of metrics that we looked at. These results are early. This initiative is going to the 31st of December, and we're going to see much more clear results at the end of this year, but we feel pretty safe right now to say that collaboration works. We have surpassed the expectations, and we're really happy to announce that this hypothesis really has something going for it. But where do we go from now? Well, if we're going to see a breakthrough in generative AI in the public sector, we believe that we need 3 levels of action. We need action on the national level. We actually have to create these AI platforms and infrastructure. We have to scale this kind of solution so that all public sector workers can have accessibility to AI tools that are information safe and that are fine-tuned and effective to use in their environment. We need training resources. We need legal guidance, and this probably has to come from the national level. We also need the coordination of annotation and fine-tuning. This is a very expert-heavy thing, and we need to have a centralized coordination of this kind of thing. We also need on the organizational level. So each public organization needs to take responsibility for training their employees. They have to work with change management, finding new ways of working to make the most use of generative AI. We need data readiness and perhaps also integration of generative AI into existing systems. And they need to allocate the resources needed to annotate data. On the individual level, every individual have to learn how to effectively use generative AI and to apply these tools in their daily work. And they have to learn how to do it in a responsible way. And they also have to contribute to annotation. It is their intuitions we want to capture. It is their knowledge about their own work that is to be reflected in these AI models. And therefore, it is instrumental that they themselves collaborate in annotation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonatan. This was really fantastic and visionary. It would be lovely to hear the story of how this became a project from the start. I just said the note. I mean, you are not the only one who mentioned the lack of data in their field, and you especially mentioned the lack of annotated data for Swedish. But then, at the same time, you say you are building a national RAG database. Yeah. And yeah, I would like just to stress that if you want to say a few more more words about it? Are you collecting a lot of data in that?
Yes, we are. So most public organizations use a very similar set of data. It is the nation's laws, it is guidelines, it is information from legal entities. And a lot of these municipalities are collecting them over and over again all individually, which is an extreme waste. We're going to try and see if we can collect this nationally, collectively, so that we have a database that is ready for all the individuals to use via retrieval augmented generation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for you? We have questions here.
Thank you. Very interesting speech. So 2 questions. First, what did it cost? And secondly, what was the biggest success factor in getting active employees or active users in the team?
Well, I see why you ask that, because that is the biggest challenge. So I'll just start with what it takes. And it takes loads and loads and loads of communication and talking and talking and talking, motivating and grounding these ideas in the organizations. And when I said loads and loads and loads and loads, that doesn't even cover how much communication was needed. And this is why it's so hard to coordinate something like this, because you really have to have people who are dedicated to just talking and coordinating people. And it takes a lot of energy and time, and you need to be very clear in your communication. You have to communicate values, you have to communicate benefits, challenges in a way that isn't overwhelming, but still is inspiring and also realistic. This is, I think, the absolutely greatest challenge. And I can only say that it's a little bit of an art form, but doing it a lot is what does it. So you wanted to know what it cost? Which part? So yeah, or well, I say we have probably about 2 million euros in this project by the end of it. That's what it cost. Excluding compute, by the way, that's probably about 500,000 euros more, I'd say.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question? Yes, I see hands here.
Hi, thanks for a very interesting talk. I was thinking if you wouldn't mind taking us a little bit more concretely into what types of use cases are your happy active users using this for, and are there any use cases that you were hoping this would be helpful for, but it hasn't quite worked out?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest misunderstanding we've seen in this project is what the RAG system can do. So a RAG system is typically very good at answering specific questions or navigating a large amount of documents, but it cannot it's not very good at doing analysis over a lot of documents. So we have seen a lot of people trying to do summarizations of documents, which does not work, or asking what are the contradictions in all our documents? We've actually had those kind of questions. Or how have our economy developed over the last 5 years, which is also nothing you can solve with a RAG system. So that's been one of the hardest things to communicate, one of the biggest challenges. I think the most successful use cases have been the simple ones. Providing a lot of context and doing things with that context. So for instance, having lots of background information and creating smaller texts, rewriting texts. There's a lot of communication having to be done in the public sector. They need to rewrite text in a simpler language, sometimes in a more complex language. They have to find ways of expressing themselves, which is quite hard. That's been very effective. But then in the end, the truth is that we quite don't know exactly, because the use cases have been so varied. And that's really the power and the mystery of generative AI, that where are the use cases? Where they're everywhere. And it is up to the individual user to find those little nuggets that really work for them.
Thanks. A quick follow-up, if I may. Are there any use cases that are currently being done where the users put in sensitive data into the system? Is that something that is currently okay to do?
No, we're not putting any sensitive data into the system right now. And that's because we are still doing a legal investigation on how we need to build a system to be able to do that. And we've come pretty far. And right now, we're not saving any information anywhere in the system. So anything that a user puts in, it just disappears, it evaporates. So we've intentionally built the system so hollow that it will be very safe. But there's still not a legal basis in place to take in sensitive information. But we're very confident that we'll be able to do this, at least from our side. But it's a large network of actors that has to be aligned on legal questions to actually accomplish this. And we don't quite know yet if that's possible, because this hasn't quite been done anywhere. At least in Sweden, it has never been done. So we're not quite sure if it's going to work, but I feel very confident.
Well, good luck. No, that sounded... I was not ironic. I was very serious. I just wish you good luck for the sake of the public sector in this country.
Do you know who works with legal and compliance in this project? Daniela Petrelli.
So thank you very much, Jonatan Permert, and please accept some flowers from Gaia. Thank you, Jonatan, for actually sharing this incredible work with the community.